Hey guys, this is Benjamin Alley again. Welcome to the Old Testament from 35,000 feet Geography Snippet 2. This session we're going to talk about an Old Testament place called Megiddo. In our last geography snippet, we learned about the Fertile Crescent and some of the major nations on the Fertile Crescent during Old Testament times. Nations like Egypt and Assyria and Babylon and Persia. In this snippet, I want to emphasize how Israel was placed in the middle of these major nations. As I have mentioned in previous snippets, Israel was the land bridge between Africa and Europe and Asia. The trade between these continents occurred on major highways that traveled through the land of Israel. Therefore, if you could control the land of Israel, you could control the trade of the world, and you could make your country very wealthy. In addition, controlling the land of Israel provided another layer of defense between your country and the rest of the world. As a result of the geography of the region, we should emphasize a couple of important points. First, because the major highways of the world passed through Israel, people from all over the world traveled through the land of Israel. And as a result, Israel often felt the impact of many different cultures during Old Testament times. On the flip side, because there were so many people passing through its territory, Israel could also have a great impact on many different cultures. Second, because controlling the land of Israel was so lucrative for trade and for defense, the major powers of the world often sought to control Israel. On your map, you see two main regions, Egypt and Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia was just the general region, or the general name for the area of the eastern side of the Fertile Crescent. Now, during Old Testament times, the major powers often sought to control Israel for their own benefit. This was especially so with Egypt and those countries in the region of Mesopotamia. A good question to ask ourselves at this point is, how did the people of Israel get such prime land in the ancient Near East? Why were they placed in this land that everybody seemed to want? You will remember from our study of the 6 major geographical moves of the Old Testament that God chose this land for his people. Remember in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, where God spoke to Abraham, saying, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land that I will show you." Abraham obeyed God and went to live in this land that God chose for him, the land of Israel. The descendants of Abraham were the people of Israel. So the people of Israel came to live in this prime land because God chose it for them. Here's my question for you, though. Do you think God chose this land on purpose? Do you think God wanted his people to live on this land bridge to the world for a reason? And if so, what was God's reason? I think we can see God's reason in the second half of God's call to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. First, God wanted to bless his people with this land. In verse 2, God promised to make Abraham into a great nation. Now, what better place for God to bless his people than this land bridge to the world, a place where it was so easy to become wealthy because of the trade that went back and forth through the land. The second, God also wanted the people to be a blessing to others in the land. At the end of verse 2, God promised Abraham that he would be a blessing. And in verse 3 it says, all the peoples on the earth would be blessed through Abraham. In other words, the people of Israel were not just supposed to be ones who received God's blessing. They were also supposed to be channels of God's blessing to the world. They were to be his witnesses to the world. Now, what better place for the Israelite people to have an influence on the world than on this very place where they would have so many travelers from all over the world constantly passing through? As people from all different cultures passed along the land bridge to carry on trade, these travelers would observe and interact with the people of Israel. The way the Israelites treated and interacted with these travelers would create opportunities for the travelers to gain an understanding into the goodness of God. The Israelites essentially were to become living testimonies of the nature and character of the true God. These interactions on the land bridge provided the travelers an opportunity to not only trust in God, but also to bring the message and blessing of this God back to their own respective countries. Therefore, by God placing His people on this land bridge, God strategically positioned them at a point where they could have the greatest impact on the world, a location that was literally at the crossroads of civilization.